She thought no one saw when her ex dragged her by the hair into that dark alley. But someone did. A stranger who moved like shadow, spoke like thunder, and marked her abuser with a curse that made his skin bleed with every crime he'd committed. What she didn't know, the man who saved her wasn't human. And he wanted her to teach him something only victims understand: why humans hurt the ones they claim to love. The grocery bag split open before Mara even reached her apartment door. Cans of soup rolled across the cracked pavement, disappearing under parked cars. A carton of eggs splattered against the curb. She dropped to her knees, scrambling to salvage what she could, her cafe uniform still reeking of burnt coffee and fryer grease after a double shift. "Damn it," she whispered, catching a rolling can of beans with her fingertips. That's when she heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming from behind the dumpster near the far end of the parking lot. Mara's entire body went rigid. She knew those footsteps. She'd memorized them during 2 years of walking on eggshells, learning to predict his moods by the weight of his stride. Heavy meant angry. Slow meant calculating. This was both. "Hey, Mara." Darren stepped into the glow of the flickering street lamp, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. His jaw was tight, that muscle near his ear twitching the way it always did before he exploded. He'd shaved recently, too recently. The razor burn on his neck was red and raw. "Darren." She stood slowly, leaving the groceries scattered. Her keys were in her right hand, the longest one protruding between her knuckles the way the self-defense video had shown her. "You need to leave." "Need to leave?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's funny. Real funny coming from you. You blocked my number. You moved apartments. You think you can just—" "What?" "Disappear?" "The restraining order says you have to stay 500 feet away." Her voice shook, but she forced the words out anyway. "I'll call the police." "Go ahead." He took a step closer. Then another. "Call them. Tell them your ex-boyfriend wanted to talk. See how fast they show up in this neighborhood." He wasn't wrong. Blackridge Apartments sat in the industrial zone where the city forgot to send patrol cars. The last time Mara had called 911, the operator had put her on hold for 11 minutes. Darren moved faster than she expected. His hand shot out and caught her hair, the same ponytail he used to say he loved, the same one he'd yanked during arguments, the same one he'd grabbed when he shoved her against the kitchen counter and told her she was worthless. Mara screamed. He dragged her backward, away from her apartment door, toward the street. Her keys fell from her hand, clattering uselessly on the pavement. Her scalp burned, white-hot pain shooting down her neck as he pulled harder. "You still belong to me," Darren shouted, his voice echoing off the brick buildings. "You think you can just leave? You think you're better than me now?" She clawed at his wrist, her nails drawing blood, but he didn't even flinch. He was stronger than her, had always been stronger, and he knew it. "Someone help." Mara's voice cracked. "Please." Apartment windows remained dark. No doors opened. The neighborhood had learned long ago not to get involved. Darren yanked her closer to the street, under the cone of yellow light from the street lamp. The bulb flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the pavement. That's when Mara saw him. A man stood across the street, perfectly still, watching. He was tall, taller than anyone she'd seen in Blackridge, and dressed in dark clothes that seemed to absorb the streetlight rather than reflect it. His face was shadowed, but she could feel his eyes on her. Not with concern. Not with the urgency of someone about to help. With something else entirely. Calm. Clinical. Like he was observing an experiment. "Help me." Mara choked out, reaching toward the stranger with her free hand. The man didn't move. Darren followed her gaze, spotted the figure across the street, and laughed. "What, you think some random guy's gonna save you? Nobody helps people like you, Mara. Nobody cares." He dragged her another 3 feet, toward the alley between the apartment buildings. Mara knew what happened in that alley. She'd seen the police tape, the bloodstain someone had tried to wash away with a hose. Her vision blurred with tears. Her scalp felt like it was tearing. She couldn't breathe. And the stranger just watched. Darren shoved her toward the alley entrance, his grip shifting from her hair to her arm, fingers digging into the bruises he'd left there weeks ago. Fresh pain layered over old trauma. "You're coming with me," Darren hissed. "We're gonna talk. Really talk. And you're gonna remember who you belong to." Mara's knees buckled. She hit the pavement hard, her palms scraping against broken glass. Blood welled up, hot and immediate. The stranger tilted his head. Just slightly, like he'd made a decision. Then he started walking toward them. His footsteps made no sound. Darren was too focused on hauling Mara to her feet to notice at first. But when the stranger stepped into the pool of flickering streetlight, close enough to touch, Darren finally froze. "The hell do you want?" Darren snapped, still gripping Mara's arm. "Walk away, man. This doesn't concern you." The stranger stopped 3 feet away. Up close, Mara could finally see his face. He was beautiful in a way that didn't make sense. Pale skin, dark hair, features so symmetrical they looked carved rather than born. But his eyes were wrong. Too dark. Too deep. Like looking into a well that had no bottom. "I have a question," the stranger said. His voice was soft, measured, with an accent Mara couldn't place. "European, maybe. Old European." Darren's face twisted with confusion and anger. "What?" The stranger's gaze dropped to where Darren's hand wrapped around Mara's arm, then lifted to meet his eyes. "Do you harm her often?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Darren's grip loosened slightly. "What kind of question?" "Answer me." Something in the stranger's voice changed. It was still quiet, still calm, but underneath it ran a current of something ancient and absolute. A command that bypassed the brain and went straight to the brainstem, the part that knew predators when it saw them. Darren's face flushed red. "Screw you." He released Mara and swung at the stranger, a wild haymaker fueled by rage and territorial instinct. The stranger caught Darren's fist in midair. He didn't step back, didn't brace himself, just caught it like catching a ball, and held it there. Darren tried to pull away. Couldn't. Mara watched, frozen, as the stranger leaned closer to Darren and whispered something she couldn't hear. His free hand moved in the air between them, fingers tracing symbols that left faint trails of silver light. Then he released Darren's fist. Darren stumbled backward, clutching his hand to his chest, eyes wide with something Mara had never seen in them before. Fear. "Run," the stranger said to Mara, without looking at her. She didn't need to be told twice. Mara ran. Behind her, she heard Darren start screaming. Mara's legs carried her 10 feet before Darren's hand clamped around her ankle. She crashed face first onto the pavement, her chin splitting open on impact. The taste of copper flooded her mouth. Darren dragged her backward, away from the street, deeper into the darkness between the buildings where the street lamp couldn't reach. "You're not going anywhere." Darren's voice had gone high-pitched, panicked. His earlier confidence had shattered into something desperate and raw. "What did he do to me?" "What the hell did he do?" Mara kicked at him, her shoe connecting with his ribs, but he held on. The alley walls pressed in on both sides, brick and graffiti and the sour smell of garbage left to rot. A fire escape ladder hung overhead, just out of reach. "Let her go." The stranger's voice came from directly behind Darren, though Mara hadn't heard him follow. He simply appeared, as if he'd stepped out of the shadows themselves. Darren whirled, finally releasing Mara's ankle. "Stay back. I'm warning you, You'll what?" The stranger took a single step forward. In the dim light filtering from the street, his eyes caught the glow differently than human eyes should. They reflected it back, like a cat's. Like a predator's. "Hit me? As you hit her?" "She's my girlfriend." "No." The stranger's voice went cold. "She was your victim." Darren swung again. This time a wild, desperate punch aimed at the stranger's throat. It should have connected. Should have crushed his windpipe. The stranger moved like water. One moment he was there, The next heed shifted 6 inches to the left, and Darren's fists sailed through empty air. The momentum carried Darren forward, off balance. The stranger caught him by the back of the neck, fingers pressing into pressure points that made Darren's entire body go rigid. "Do you know what true pain feels like?" the stranger asked conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. "Not the pain you inflict, the pain you receive." Darren tried to speak, but only a choked sound came out. Mara pressed herself against the alley wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. She was trapped watching something she couldn't understand, something that made her skin crawl with primal recognition. This man wasn't human. The stranger's free hand rose, fingers splayed, and began moving in precise patterns. The silver light returned, brighter now, almost blinding in the alley's darkness. Symbols formed in the air, geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, that made Mara's eyes water and her head pound. The symbols sank into Darren's back like hooks piercing flesh. Darren screamed. It was a sound Mara had never heard from him before. Pure, animal terror mixed with agony. His body convulsed, spine arching backward at an impossible angle. The silver light spread across his skin like cracks in ice, tracing lines along his shoulders, down his arms, wrapping around his ribcage. "Every bruise," the stranger whispered, his mouth close to Darren's ear. "Every cut, every moment of fear and pain you gave her, you will wear them all." "What are you?" Darren gasped. The stranger smiled. His teeth were too white, too sharp. "Justice." He released Darren, who collapsed onto the filthy alley floor, gasping and shaking. The silver light faded, sinking beneath his skin until only faint traces remained, thin lines along his spine that pulsed with each heartbeat. The stranger turned to Mara. She flinched, pressing harder against the wall. Her hands found a broken bottle behind her, and she raised it defensively, the jagged glass pointed at him. "Don't," she managed to say. "Don't come near me." He stopped immediately, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I mean you no harm. You're not human, it wasn't a question."
"No."
His honesty somehow made it worse. Mara's mind raced, trying to process what she'd just witnessed. Magic. He'd used magic. Real magic, not card tricks or illusions. And his eyes, his teeth, the way he moved. "What are you?" she whispered, echoing Darren's question. The stranger considered her for a long moment. Someone who dislikes bullies. Behind him, Darren was trying to crawl away, leaving a trail of something dark and wet on the pavement. Not blood. Something else. The silver cracks on his skin were spreading, and where they spread, his flesh looked burned, blistered. "He's dying," Mara said. "No," the stranger glanced back at Darren with clinical detachment. "He's learning. The curse won't kill him. It will simply teach him what he taught you." Curse. A reflection. The stranger's gaze returned to her. "He will experience every injury he gave you. Every bruise will bloom on his skin. Every pulled hair will tear from his scalp. Every moment of terror will visit him in the night. For as long as he lives." Mara's hand, still holding the broken bottle, began to shake. That's insane. That's not possible. Yet it is happening." Darren had made it to the mouth of the alley. He pulled himself upright using a dumpster, his face twisted in agony. When he looked back at them, Mara saw something she'd never seen before in their entire relationship. Darren was afraid of her. Or what stood beside her. He ran, stumbling and lurching, disappearing into the street beyond. The stranger watched him go with satisfaction. "He won't trouble you again." "Who are you?" Mara demanded, the broken bottle still raised between them. "My name is Valen." He took a step backward, giving her space. "And you should go home now. Lock your doors. Forget this night. Forget." Mara's voice rose, hysteria creeping in. "How am I supposed to forget?" But he was already gone. She blinked, and the alley was empty except for her and the lingering scent of something ancient and cold. something that smelled like old stone and older blood. The hospital lights were too bright. Darren had made it 6 blocks before collapsing in the parking lot of a 24-hour pharmacy. The security footage would later show him clawing at his back, tearing his shirt off, screaming at something no one else could see. Now he lay in a bed in County General's psychiatric ward, restrained at the wrists and ankles, his body betraying him in ways that defied medical explanation. Dr. Rashida Chin stood at the foot of his bed, reviewing his chart for the 3rd time. Nothing made sense. Patient presented with acute onset of dermal lesions, apparent self-inflicted wounds, and severe psychological distress, she murmured, reading aloud. But the wounds... She stepped closer, studying Darren's exposed arms. Fresh bruises bloomed across his biceps, finger-shaped marks, 4 on top, 1 underneath. The exact pattern someone's hand would leave while gripping too hard. But the bruises were appearing in reverse, starting yellow and fading to purple, as if healing backward. They weren't there an hour ago, the night nurse said from the doorway. I checked when I did rounds. His skin was clear except for the marks on his back. Dr. Chin pulled on latex gloves and gently tilted Darren's head to examine his scalp. Small patches of hair had come loose, leaving raw, irritated skin behind. Not alopecia. Not trichotillomania. The hair looked pulled, torn out by force, but Darren's hands had been restrained since admission. Has he said anything coherent? Just keep screaming about demons, the nurse's voice dropped. And someone named Mara. Darren's eyes snapped open. She did this, he gasped, his voice hoarse from screaming. Mara, she cursed me. She, and that thing. Dr. Chin leaned in, activating her penlight to check his pupils. Mr. Grayson, can you tell me what drugs you took tonight? No drugs. Darren thrashed against the restraints. I'm not high. Look at me. Look at what's happening. As if on cue, a new wound appeared on his forearm. A thin line, like a scratch from a fingernail, welling up with blood. Then another. And another. 5 parallel lines dragging down his skin. Dr. Chin stumbled backward. That's not possible. Call someone, Darren shrieked. Call a priest. Call. His words dissolved into screaming as the skin on his neck began to redden, forming the pattern of hands. Choking hands. The nurse hit the panic button. Within seconds, 2 orderlies rushed in with a sedative. Dr. Chin watched them inject Darren with enough Ativan to knock out a horse. His screaming faded to whimpers, then to shallow breathing, but the wounds kept appearing. Slowly. Methodically. Like an invisible artist painting on his skin with a brush dipped in suffering. She pulled out her phone and texted her supervisor. Need site consult and possible CDC involvement. Patient presenting with unexplained dermographic manifestations. Recommend isolation protocol. Across town, Mara stood in the shower until the water ran cold. She couldn't wash away the memory of the alley. Couldn't scrub off the feeling of Valen's eyes watching her. Couldn't forget the silver light or Darren's screams, or the way her entire understanding of reality had shattered in less than 5 minutes. Magic was real. Monsters were real. And one of them had saved her. She dressed in her spare cafe uniform, covering the bruises on her arms with long sleeves despite the summer heat. Her shift started in 40 minutes. She'd already called out twice this month. Once because Darren had given her a black eye she couldn't hide, once because he'd taken her car keys and she'd had no way to get to work. She couldn't afford to call out again. The cafe was mercifully quiet when she arrived. Morning rush hadn't started yet. Just a handful of regulars nursing coffees and staring at their phones. Mara tied on her apron and started the opening routine on autopilot, grinding beans, checking milk inventory, wiping down tables that were already clean. Rough night. She jumped, nearly dropping the coffee pot. Her coworker, Sam, stood behind the counter with concern creasing his face. I'm fine, Mara said automatically. Your chin's bleeding. She touched her face, felt the split skin she'd forgotten about. The fall in the alley. It felt like it had happened years ago instead of hours ago. I tripped, she lied. On my apartment steps. Sam didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes. But he was young, maybe 22, and didn't know how to push past her defenses. He handed her a bandage from the first aid kit and went back to restocking cups. Mara caught her reflection in the espresso machine's polished surface. She looked haunted. Dark circles under her eyes. Split chin. Hair tangled despite her attempt to brush it. The collar of her shirt had shifted, revealing the edge of a bruise on her collarbone. She adjusted her shirt and went back to work. The morning passed in a blur of orders. Latte with oat milk. Americano, extra shot. Cappuccino, dry. The familiar rhythm kept her grounded, kept her from thinking about silver light and impossible men and curses that carved punishment into flesh. At 10:47 a.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't check it, but something made her look. Patient Darren Grayson, admitted County General Psych Ward. Listed you as emergency contact. Please call. Mara's hands shook so hard she had to set down the cup she was holding. The curse was real. Everything was real. And she had no idea what happened next. Valen had not slept in 300 years. He didn't require it, didn't miss it, had long ago forgotten what dreams felt like. Instead, he filled his nights with observation, watching humanity play out its small dramas under the cover of darkness, studying the patterns of cruelty and kindness that had remained remarkably consistent across centuries. But dawn had come, and unlike the younger vampires who fled to their coffins and basement sanctuaries, Valen had learned to walk in daylight. It required effort, concentration, and a significant portion of his ancient power channeled into shielding his skin from the sun's burn. But it was worth it. Humans were so much more interesting during the day. He sat on a bench across from the Grindhouse Cafe, a paperback novel open in his lap. Hemingway, purchased from a used bookstore an hour ago to complete his disguise. A tourist map lay folded beside him. His camera, though he had no film in it, hung from his neck. To any observer, he was just another traveler killing time before a museum opened. No one looked twice at him. Through the cafe's front window, he watched Mara work. She moved efficiently behind the counter, her motions practiced and precise. Steam rose from the espresso machine. She smiled at customers, that particular service industry smile that never reached the eyes. Polite, careful, numb. Valen had seen that expression before, thousands of times across thousands of faces. The look of someone who'd learned to make themselves small, invisible, inoffensive. Prey behavior, refined through repetition. A businessman in an expensive suit barked his order at her. Annoyed, she hadn't heard him over the noise of the grinder. Mara apologized immediately, automatically, though the fault wasn't hers. The businessman didn't acknowledge her apology, just tapped his watch impatiently. Valen's fingers tightened on the book. He watched Mara hand over the coffee, watched the businessman leave without a tip, watched her shoulders slump the moment he was gone. She pressed her palms against the counter, head bowed, taking 3 slow breaths. Recovering, resetting. Then her coworker, a young man with bleached hair and nervous energy, said something that made her attempt a real smile. It didn't quite work, but the effort was there. Fascinating. Valen had marked Darren Grayson with one of the oldest punishments in vampire law, the reflection curse. It was technically illegal in most vampire jurisdictions, not because it was too cruel, but because it was too visible, too likely to draw attention to their kind. But Valen had never cared much for vampire law. He'd been king before those laws existed, had walked the earth when vampires were still considered gods by humans who didn't know any better. The council could file their complaints. He'd ignore them as he always did. What interested him now was the woman. Mara Clementine Hayes, age 26, according to the driver's license he'd glimpsed when she'd dropped her wallet in the alley. Originally from a small town in Ohio. No family listed on her emergency contacts. 2 years of community college before she dropped out. 3 different addresses in the past 18 months. Running. She'd been running from Darren Grayson long before last night. Valen had seen thousands of abusive relationships, had witnessed every variation of human cruelty that could exist between people who claimed to love each other. But he'd rarely intervened. Human problems were human problems. Violence was their inheritance, coded into their DNA alongside their capacity for art and innovation. So, why had he intervened last night? He tilted his head, considering the question. Watching Darren drag Mara by her hair, watching her scream with no one coming to help, watching her terror. Something had shifted in him. A feeling he hadn't experienced in decades. Anger. Not the explosive rage of young vampires still clinging to their human emotions, but cold, purposeful anger. The kind that made him remember what he'd been before civilization had taught him manners. Before he'd learned to hide among humans instead of ruling them. A predator's anger at watching something smaller hurt something weaker still. Across the street, Mara's phone buzzed. He saw her check it, saw the color drain from her face. She gripped the counter's edge, knuckles going white. The hospital had contacted her. Darren's condition was worsening. Valen leaned back on the bench, satisfied. The curse was working exactly as intended. By now, Darren would have experienced every bruise, every moment of pain, every second of fear he'd inflicted on Mara over their relationship. The physical wounds were just the beginning. Tonight, when darkness fell, the psychological torment would begin. The nightmares, the paranoia, the constant, gnawing certainty that he was being hunted. Mara disappeared into the cafe's back room. When she emerged 5 minutes later, her eyes were red. She'd been crying. The young coworker tried to talk to her, but she shook her head and went back to work. Burying it. Pretending. Surviving. Valen had watched humans survive for centuries. They were remarkably good at it, even when every circumstance suggested they shouldn't be. They built lives on foundations of sand and called it stability. They loved people who hurt them and called it loyalty. They woke up every morning and chose to keep going despite having every reason to quit. He didn't understand them. That's why he studied them. That's why he lived among them for 300 years, watching their patterns, trying to decode the logic behind their choices. A young woman pushing a stroller walked past his bench, her infant fussing. She stopped nearby, bouncing the stroller gently, murmuring soft reassurances. The baby quieted immediately, comforted by her presence. Valen looked away. Humans hurt each other with such creativity, such dedication. But they also comforted each other with equal devotion, protected each other, sacrificed for each other. It made no logical sense. Across the street, Mara handed a coffee to an elderly woman who struggled to count out exact change. Mara smiled, genuinely this time, and told her not to worry about the remaining 30 cents. The old woman patted her hand in thanks. Such a small moment of kindness. Why did it matter? Valen closed the book without reading a single page and stood. The sun was climbing higher, its heat pressing against his shields. He'd spent enough power maintaining his daylight protection. Time to return to the shadows. But he'd be back tomorrow. There was still so much to learn. Dr. Chin hadn't gone home. 48 hours into Darren Grayson's admission, she'd requested a cot in the staff room and survival on vending machine coffee and stale donuts. Her supervisor had suggested she take a break. She'd refused. This case was beyond anything in her 15 years of emergency medicine. The wounds kept coming. At 3:17 a.m. on the second night, she documented a new manifestation. Burn-like marks appeared on Darren's wrists, circular, approximately 2 inches in diameter, exactly where someone might grab to restrain. The tissue showed signs of thermal damage, but his room temperature remained a constant 68 degrees. By 4:45 a.m., bite marks appeared on his shoulder. Human teeth patterns, clear as fingerprints. But Darren had been alone in his room, strapped to the bed, under constant video surveillance. The footage showed nothing. Just Darren sleeping fitfully, then jerking awake as the wounds appeared on his skin like invisible jaws had clamped down. Dr. Chun increased his sedation. It didn't stop the marks from appearing. It just stopped him from screaming. At 7:30 a.m., she was reviewing his file when Nurse Patterson knocked on her office door. "There's something you need to see," Patterson said, her face pale. His back. They went together to Darren's room. Dr. Chun pulled back the hospital gown to reveal his spine. Words. Carved into his skin in thin, precise lines. Not deep enough to require stitches, but clear enough to read. The letters wept clear fluid, too thin to be blood, too viscous to be water. Worthless. Stupid. Nothing. The same words Darren had used. Mara had mentioned them during the police interview. Dr. Chun had read the report after discovering Mara listed as his emergency contact. "Call a psych consult," Dr. Chun said quietly, "and document everything. Photos, measurements, the works." "Should we call someone else?" Patterson's voice dropped to a whisper. This isn't medical." "What are you suggesting?" Patterson glanced at the door, making sure they were alone. "My grandmother used to tell stories. About curses. About people who wronged others and paid for it in their flesh." Dr. Chun wanted to dismiss it. Should have dismissed it. She was a woman of science, of evidence-based medicine, of peer-reviewed journals. But she'd watched wounds appear on a man's skin out of nowhere for 2 straight days. "Document everything," she repeated. "I'll make some calls." Detective Marcus Webb had seen the hospital report and didn't know what to make of it. Unexplained injuries. Psychological break. Patient claiming his ex-girlfriend had cursed him. It read like a bad horror movie, except real people didn't get cursed. Real people got high, got violent, got what they deserved from the wrong end of a knife fight. But the doctors were insistent something unusual was happening. So here he sat in the county general cafeteria, across from a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Mara Hayes wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her cafe uniform was wrinkled. A bandage covered her chin. Bruises peeked out from under her sleeves. "Miss Hayes, I need to ask you some questions about Darren Grayson." "I already talked to the police," she said. 3 days ago. I gave my statement." "I know. But Darren's in the hospital, and he's claiming you had something to do with his condition." Mara's laugh was brittle, broken. "He's claiming I cursed him. That's what the nurse told me on the phone. That he keeps saying I'm a witch or something." "Did you assault Mr. Grayson?"
"No."
"Did you hire someone to assault him?" "No." She met his eyes directly. "Detective, Darren attacked me 3 nights ago. He dragged me by my hair into an alley.
I ran."
That's the last time I saw him." Webb consulted his notes. "The restraining order you filed was approved 2 days ago. Says here he violated it on the night in question." "Yes." "So he attacked you, and now he's in the hospital with injuries that match." Webb paused, choosing his words carefully. "That match the injuries he gave you over the course of your relationship." Mara's hands tightened on the cup. "What are you asking me, detective?" "I'm asking if you know how that's possible." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, "No, I don't. But I'm not sorry it's happening." Webb leaned back. "Honest answer, at least." "The doctors can't explain his condition. They've run every test. No drugs in his system. No evidence of self-harm beyond what's appearing. It's like someone's punishing him." Mara finished softly. "Yeah," Webb studied her face. "You have any enemies? Anyone who might want revenge on your behalf?" Valen's face flashed through her mind. Those 2 dark eyes. The silver light. The way he'd moved like water and spoken like thunder. "Do you harm her often?" "No," she lied. "I don't have anyone." Webb pulled out a business card, slid it across the table. "If you think of anything unusual that happened that night, you call me." "Okay." Mara took the card. "Okay." She wouldn't call. What would she say? "Yes, detective, a vampire marked my ex-boyfriend with a curse that's making him experience every awful thing he did to me." No, I don't know his address, but he sits across from my cafe sometimes and watches me like I'm a documentary. Webb stood, then paused. Miss Hayes? For what it's worth, I read the police reports. All of them. The ones you filed, and the ones you didn't. What Darren did to you. He shook his head. You didn't deserve any of it. Mara's throat tightened. Thank you. After he left, she sat alone in the cafeteria, staring at the detective's card. A nurse hurried past, speaking urgently into her phone. Patient in 347 just started screaming about demons again. We need another psych eval. Room 347. Darren's room. The curse was getting worse. And somewhere in the city, Valen was watching, waiting, studying. Mara didn't know which terrified her more, that Darren was suffering or that part of her was glad. The bus pulled into Blackridge Station at 11:47 p.m., 3 hours late due to construction on the interstate. Only 5 passengers disembarked. 4 of them were locals, tired from visiting family in neighboring cities, eager to get home. They collected their bags quickly and disappeared into the parking lot. The 5th passenger took her time. Isolde Thorne stepped onto the platform with the careful precision of someone assessing a battlefield. She was pale, unnaturally so, even under the harsh fluorescent lights, with silver blonde hair cut short and practical. She wore dark jeans, a leather jacket despite the summer heat, and carried a single duffel bag that looked military issue. To any observer, she was just another traveler. Young, maybe 30, unremarkable. The scars told a different story. They were barely visible in the station's lighting, but they were there. Thin white lines across her knuckles, a longer one disappearing beneath her collar, another tracing her jawline. The kind of scars you collected fighting things that fought back with teeth and claws. Isolde breathed in slowly, tasting the air. The city smelled like exhaust fumes, old garbage and desperation. But underneath, barely perceptible, was the signature she'd been tracking for 3 days. Vampire magic. Old vampire magic. She pulled out her phone, an older model, modified with scrambling software and encrypted apps the general public didn't have access to. 3 missed calls from her guild master. She ignored them and opened a different application, one that showed a map of Blackridge with a pulsing red, near the industrial district. The curse signature was strongest there. Isolde had been hunting vampires for 12 years, since the night one had murdered her sister in what the police had ruled a random mugging gone wrong. The guild had found her 6 months later, gave her training, weapons, and purpose. She'd killed 43 vampires since then. Most were young, stupid, reckless, the kind who left bodies in their wake and drew human attention. But this one was different. The reflection curse was ancient magic, forbidden by the Vampire Council since 1847. The last recorded use had been in Prague in 1823, when a vampire lord had punished a corrupt magistrate by making him experience every execution he'd ordered. The magistrate had gone mad within a week. Whoever cast this curse was either very old or very powerful. Possibly both. Isolde shouldered her duffel and walked to the station's exit. A single taxi waited outside, the driver scrolling through his phone. She knocked on the window. Blackridge Motor Inn, she said. You know it. The driver looked her over, sizing up her ability to pay. $25.
Fine.
The drive took 15 minutes, through streets that got progressively worse, more potholes, more graffiti, more buildings with boarded-up windows. The Motor Inn was exactly what she'd expected. 2 stories of peeling paint and flickering neon, the kind of place that rented by the hour and didn't ask questions.
Perfect.
She paid the driver and checked in under a fake name, requesting a room on the 2nd floor with a view of the street. The clerk barely looked at her forged ID. Room 212 smelled like cigarette smoke and mildew. Isolde locked the door, drew the curtains, and unpacked her duffel with methodical efficiency. 2 silver daggers, blessed by a priest in Rome. A crossbow, compact and modern, with bolts tipped in hawthorn wood. 3 vials of holy water. A leather-bound journal containing notes on every vampire she tracked. And at the bottom, wrapped in black silk, a relic her guild master had given her for this mission. The compass of Saint Jerome. It looked like an ordinary pocket watch, brass and worn smooth from centuries of handling. But when she opened it, the needle inside didn't point north. It pointed toward the nearest vampire using active magic. Isolde set it on the nightstand and watched. The needle spun lazily, searching, then locked onto a direction, northeast, toward the city center. The vampire wasn't actively casting right now, but the residual signature was strong enough to track. She pulled out her journal and began reviewing what she knew. Subject: unknown vampire. Estimated age 200+ years based on curse complexity. Location: Blackridge, Industrial District. Known activity: cast reflection curse on human male, Darren Grayson, currently hospitalized. Motivation: unknown. Personal vendetta? Justice? Feeding pattern? Risk level: extreme. The Vampire Council would want this vampire eliminated quickly and quietly. The curse was too visible, too likely to draw human attention to their kind. Already there were hospital reports, police interest, whispers of something unnatural happening. Isolde had 3 days to find and kill the vampire before the council sent their own cleanup crew. And council crews didn't discriminate. They'd eliminate anyone who'd witnessed the supernatural, including innocent humans. She had to move fast. Her phone buzzed. Her guild master again. This time she answered. "I'm in position," she said without preamble. "The council is watching this closely." Her master's voice was gravelly, worn from decades of shouting orders. "They want confirmation of the kill within 72 hours. Understood." Isolde, a pause. "The signature suggests this isn't a young vampire. If it's who I think it is."
Who?
"There are stories about a vampire king who disappeared from European records around 1750. Valen Corvinus. If this is him, he's over 3 centuries old. He won't go down easy." Isolde checked her weapons. "They never do. Don't engage until you're certain. Observe first. Learn his patterns." "I know how to hunt." She hung up before he could argue. The compass needle remained steady, pointing northeast. Toward the vampire. Toward her target. Isolde allowed herself a thin smile. 3 days was more time than she needed. She'd been hunting monsters long enough to know they all made the same mistake eventually. They got comfortable, started thinking they were untouchable. And that's when she killed them. Mara had started taking different routes home. She left work at different times, sometimes early, sometimes late, asking Sam to cover for her or offering to cover for him in return. She varied her path, down Main Street one day, through the shopping district the next, cutting through the park when she felt brave enough. But she always felt watched. Not threatened, just observed. On the 4th night after the alley, she was leaving the cafe through the back exit, the one that opened onto a narrow service road behind the building, when she finally confronted the feeling. "I know you're there," she said to the empty air. "I know you're following me." For a moment, nothing. Just the hum of the cafe's exhaust fan and distant traffic. Then Valen stepped out from behind the dumpster, as if he'd been part of the shadows themselves. "Perceptive," he said. Mara's hand went to her phone, fingers hovering over the emergency call button. "Stay back. I am 15 feet away." He made no move to come closer. "Is this acceptable?" The question threw her. Acceptable? What kind of stalker asked permission? "Why are you following me?" "I wanted to ensure you were safe." Valen tilted his head, studying her face the way someone might study a painting. "The curse on Darren Grayson is permanent. But men like him often have friends. Allies who might blame you for his condition. The hospital says he's getting worse." "Yes." "Is he going to die?" "No." Valen's expression remained neutral. "The curse will not kill him. It will simply teach him what suffering feels like. Every night, he will experience the fear he made you feel. Every day, his body will wear the marks of his cruelty. This will continue until his natural death, decades from now." Mara's stomach turned. "That's torture." Yes. You can't just, she struggled to find words. You can't just curse people. That's not how justice works. Human justice failed you. Valen's voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel. You filed restraining orders. You called police. You ran. Nothing stopped him. So I did. You don't know me. You don't know what I want. I know you were being dragged into an alley by a man who intended to hurt you. I know you screamed for help and no one came. He paused. I know that if I had not intervened, you would be in a hospital bed. Or a morgue. The words hit like a slap because they were true. Mara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the summer heat. What are you? She asked quietly. You're not human. Your eyes, the way you move, that magic. I am vampire. The word hung in the air between them. Vampire. Like from movies, from books, from stories told to scare children. Except he was standing right there, real and solid, and admitting it like he was telling her his job title. Vampires aren't real, Mara said weakly. Yet I am here. She wanted to run. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run. But her feet stayed planted. Because if she ran, where would she go? Back to her apartment where Darren had found her? To the police who couldn't stop a supernatural curse? To a world that suddenly made no sense. Why did you help me? She asked instead. Valen considered the question for a long moment. I dislike bullies. That's it? You cursed a man for life because you don't like bullies. I have seen many bullies in my time. Warlords, kings, common criminals. They all share the same belief, that power gives them the right to hurt those weaker than themselves. His eyes caught the dim light from the street lamp, reflecting it back. I have lived 300 years. I have power that makes human strength look like nothing. And yet I do not drag women into alleys. I do not hurt those who cannot defend themselves. So, you're what? A vigilante vampire? I am justice that arrives after human systems fail. Mara laughed, a short, sharp sound that was more desperation than humor. This is insane. I'm having a conversation with a vampire about justice. I should call the police. You are welcome to try, Valen gestured toward her phone. But they cannot help you understand what has happened. They cannot protect you from what you now know exists. And they certainly cannot stop me if I wished you harm. Is that a threat? No, he took a step backward, increasing the distance between them. It is a statement of reality. I mean you no harm, Mara Hayes. I am simply ensuring that Darren Grayson never harms you again. That is all. And then what? You disappear? Go back to cursing other abusive men? Perhaps he paused. Or perhaps I continue to observe. To learn. Humans are endlessly fascinating in their capacity for both cruelty and kindness. I don't want to be observed like some lab rat. Then what do you want? The question was so simple, so direct, that Mara found herself without an answer. What did she want? To feel safe? To stop looking over her shoulder? To wake up one morning without the weight of fear pressing on her chest? I want to go home, she said finally. I want to sleep without nightmares. I want my life back. He will never touch you again, Valen said. That much I can promise. Promises from a vampire. Mara shook her head. My life has gotten really weird. Yes. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since he'd revealed himself. He was beautiful in an unsettling way, like a statue come to life. Too perfect. Too still. Even when he moved, there was something wrong about it, something that marked him as other. I'm going to walk home now, Mara said. Don't follow me. Valen inclined his head slightly. As you wish. She turned and walked away, every step feeling like it might be her last, waiting for him to lunge, to attack, to prove that monsters were monsters no matter how polite they pretended to be. But when she reached the end of the alley and looked back, he was gone. Only the shadows remained. And Mara wasn't sure if she felt relieved or more afraid than before. Detective Webb returned to the precinct at 2 a.m. and went straight to the evidence room. Something wasn't adding up. He had reviewed Mara Hayes' file a dozen times. 3 years of documented domestic violence calls, 2 restraining orders filed and dismissed, hospital visits with injuries she'd claimed were from falling or walking into doors, classic abuse pattern. Then Darren Grayson attacks her again, and suddenly he's in the hospital with mysterious injuries that doctors can't explain. Webb didn't believe in coincidences. He pulled the file on Grayson and started cross-referencing. Prior arrests for assault, drunk and disorderly, 1 domestic violence charge that had been dropped when the victim recanted. The guy was a textbook abuser. But that didn't explain the wounds appearing on his body out of nowhere. Webb's phone buzzed. Text from Dr. Chen. Need to show you something. Can you come to County General? 20 minutes later, he stood in a hospital corridor, looking at photographs that made his skin crawl. These appeared over the course of 6 hours, Dr. Chen explained, spreading the images across a desk. No medical explanation. No way for him to self-inflict while restrained. The photos showed Darren's body transforming into a canvas of violence. Handprint bruises, scratches, burn marks, and words carved into his skin in thin, precise letters. You're nothing without me. No one will believe you. I'll kill you if you leave. Webb recognized the phrases from Mara's police statements. Things Darren had said to her, documented in reports dating back 2 years. This is impossible, Webb said quietly. I know. People don't just manifest injuries from thin air. I know Dr. Chen's voice was strained. But I've witnessed it. Multiple nurses have witnessed it. We have partial video documentation. Whatever is happening to Darren Grayson, it's not psychosomatic. It's not drug-induced. It's not anything in my medical textbooks. Webb stared at the photos. His rational mind rejected what his eyes were seeing. But 15 years as a detective had taught him that sometimes reality was stranger than logic allowed. What do you think is happening? He asked. Dr. Chen hesitated. Off the record? Off the record. I think someone cursed him. Webb waited for her to laugh, to say she was joking. She didn't. Cursed, he repeated flatly. My grandmother was from Haiti. She told me stories about people who wronged others and paid for it in their flesh. About spirits that enforced justice when human law couldn't. Dr. Chen met his eyes. I never believed her. But I'm watching those stories play out in front of me. Webb rubbed his face, exhaustion pressing down on him. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, we can't arrest someone for supernatural assault. There's no legal framework for that. I'm not asking you to arrest anyone. I'm asking you to protect Mara Hayes. From what? From whatever did this to Darren. From Darren himself, if he escapes. From the people who might come looking for answers. Dr. Chen's voice dropped. Detective, if this is a curse, and if curses are real, then we're dealing with forces we don't understand. And Mara Hayes is at the center of it. The next morning, Webb found himself back at the Grindhouse Cafe. Mara was behind the counter, moving through her routine with mechanical efficiency. When she saw him, her shoulders tensed. Miss Hayes, can we talk? They sat at a corner table, away from other customers. Webb pulled out his notebook, more for show than necessity. He had a good memory for details. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Mara's hands wrapped around her coffee cup. Okay. The night Darren attacked you, you said you ran, that you got away. Is that the complete story? She was quiet for a long moment.
Yes.
You didn't see anyone else? No one intervened. Her eyes flickered. Just for a second, but Webb caught it. She was lying. Miss Hayes, Darren is experiencing something that doctors can't explain. Injuries appearing on his body that match exactly what he did to you over the course of your relationship. Now, I don't believe in magic or curses or anything supernatural. But I do believe someone is responsible for what's happening to him. Good, Mara said quietly. Webb blinked. Excuse me? I said good. I hope whoever's doing it continues. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. Do you know what it's like, detective? To call the police and have them show up 2 hours later? To get a restraining order that's just a piece of paper? To watch the system fail over and over while someone destroys you? I know the system isn't perfect. It's not just imperfect. It's broken. Darren violated the restraining order and dragged me into an alley. And you know what would have happened if I'd pressed charges? He would have gotten probation. Maybe anger management classes. And then he would have come back worse. Webb couldn't argue with that. He'd seen too many cases end exactly that way. So if someone or something is finally making him pay for what he did? Mara continued. I'm not going to apologize for being glad about it. You understand that legally. Legally, I'm the victim. Legally, I have a restraining order. Legally, I did everything right. She met his eyes. And I still got dragged by my hair into an alley. So forgive me if I don't care much about legally anymore. Webb closed his notebook. She was right, and they both knew it. For what it's worth, he said, I am sorry. The system should have protected you. But it didn't.
No.
It didn't. He pulled out his card, the same one he'd given her before, and wrote his personal cell number on the back. If you see anything unusual, anyone following you, anyone asking questions, anything that makes you feel unsafe, you call me directly. Day or night. Mara took the card. Thank you. As Webb left the cafe, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. Something that existed just outside his understanding of how the world worked. Something watching from the shadows. Darren woke at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of his own screaming. The nightmares had started 3 nights ago. Not normal nightmares, the kind where you forgot them upon waking. These were different. Vivid, visceral. Real in ways that left marks deeper than wounds. In the dreams, he was Mara. He felt her fear when Darren, came home drunk and angry. He experienced the pain of being shoved against the kitchen counter, the humiliation of being called worthless in front of friends, the terror of hands around his throat. Every night, the curse forced him to live through her memories from her perspective. And every morning, he woke up with new marks on his skin. Tonight had been the worst yet. In the dream, he'd felt himself being dragged by the hair across pavement, his scalp tearing, his knees scraping, his voice hoarse from screaming while neighbors pretended not to hear. He knew that memory. He'd created it. Now he lived it. No more, Darren gasped, tearing at the restraints on his wrists. No more, no more, no more. The leather straps held. They always held. But tonight, something was different. The night nurse hadn't come by for her usual check. The hallway outside his room was dark, quiet. Through the small window in his door, he could see the nurse's station, empty. System error. Fire drill. Staff emergency. He didn't know and didn't care. This was his chance. Darren twisted his wrist, ignoring the pain as the restraint cut into his skin. He was thinner now. The curse had stolen his appetite, his sleep, his strength. His wrist slipped through the leather loop, skin tearing but coming free. One hand loose, then the other, then his ankles. He stumbled out of bed, his hospital gown hanging off his skeletal frame. His reflection in the dark window stopped him cold. He looked like a corpse. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, skin covered in overlapping scars and fresh wounds that wept clear fluid. Words carved across his chest, his arms, his face. Every cruelty he'd ever spoken, written in his own flesh. The demon was inside him, under his skin, in his bones. He had to cut it out. Darren's eyes fell on the nurse's station desk visible through his door window. Medical supplies, scissors, scalpels. He crept into the hallway, bare feet silent on cold linoleum. The station was indeed empty. The night shift nurse had been called to the ER for an emergency. Her computer was still logged in, her bag hanging on the back of her chair. Darren grabbed the bag and ran. He made it to the stairwell before the first alarm sounded. By then, he'd already found what he needed in the nurse's purse. Her phone, her car keys, $70 in cash. The phone was locked, but the emergency call function still worked. And in the recent messages, he found it. A text chain with someone named Sarah. The last message read, "Just got to work. Crazy night ahead." But earlier messages from days ago were still there, including one with an address.
No.
Not an address. A contact. He scrolled desperately through the phone, looking for anything, any clue about where to find the one person who could end this curse. Then he saw it. A news alert the nurse had opened 3 days ago. Local woman files restraining order against ex-boyfriend. The article mentioned the Grindhouse Cafe. Mara's workplace. Darren clutched the phone, a plan forming through the fog of pain and madness. He had to find her, had to make her understand, had to make her lift the curse before it destroyed him completely. Or if she wouldn't lift it, if she couldn't, he'd make sure she suffered it with him. Isolde watched the vampire from across the street, patient and invisible. He'd been sitting on the same bench for 3 hours, pretending to read, occasionally checking his phone like a normal human. But she saw through the disguise. Saw the way his chest didn't rise and fall with breath. Saw how his eyes tracked movement with predatory precision. Saw the slight shimmer around his skin, active magic protecting him from daylight. Valen Corvinus. It had to be. The compass in her pocket pulled steadily toward him, confirming what she already knew. This was her target. The vampire who'd cast the reflection curse. The one the council wanted eliminated. She'd been tracking his pattern for 2 days. He spent mornings watching the cafe where Mara Hayes worked, afternoons in the city library, reading century-old newspapers, evenings in the abandoned industrial district. Nights, she lost him at night, which meant he had a sanctuary somewhere protected by wards. But she didn't need to find a sanctuary. She just needed to wait until he was distracted. Isolde's phone buzzed. Text from her guild master. Hospital reports patient escaped. Darren Grayson. Considered dangerous. She frowned. The cursed human had escaped? That complicated things. A human victim running around the city drawing attention would force the council to accelerate their timeline. She had 48 hours now. Maybe less. Across the street, Valen's head tilted slightly. He set down his book, body going tense in a way that suggested he'd sensed something. Isolde pressed herself deeper into the doorway, where she'd been watching. Had he detected her?
Impossible.
She wore a blessed charm that masked her presence from supernatural senses. But Valen wasn't looking at her building. He was looking toward the hospital district. Then, without warning, he stood and walked away, fast, purposeful, no longer pretending to be human. His form blurred slightly, moving at speeds that would look like a trick of light to human eyes.
He was hunting.
Isolde smiled grimly and followed. The vampire had just made his first mistake. He'd let something matter more than his own safety. And that's when predators became prey. She checked her weapons, silver dagger secure, crossbow loaded, holy water ready, and moved through the city like a ghost. Tonight, a vampire king would die. She just had to wait for the perfect moment. Mara's shift should have ended at 6, but Sam had called in sick, and the evening rush had been brutal. By the time she locked the cafe's front door at 9:47 p.m., every muscle in her body ached. She'd covered a 12-hour shift on 4 hours of sleep. Her feet throbbed. Her head pounded. All she wanted was to collapse into bed and forget the world existed. She took the back exit into the parking garage, a crumbling concrete structure shared by 3 businesses. Her car was on the rooftop level, the cheapest spot, where security cameras didn't reach and the lighting barely functioned. The elevator was broken again. Of course it was. Mara climbed the stairs, each step an effort, her keys already in her hand. The stairwell smelled like urine and stale cigarettes. Graffiti covered every surface. Somewhere above, a door banged in the wind. She emerged onto the rooftop level, where a dozen cars sat scattered across faded parking spaces. The city stretched out beyond the garage's low walls, lights twinkling like fallen stars, traffic humming in the distance. Her Honda was parked in the far corner, beneath a flickering overhead light that made everything look like a horror movie. Mara was halfway to her car when she heard the footsteps. Fast. Running. coming from the stairwell behind her. She spun around, keys raised like a weapon. Darren exploded through the stairwell door. He looked like death given form. Hospital gown hanging off his skeletal frame, feet bare and bleeding, skin covered in wounds that wept and cracked. His head was partially shaved, revealing patches of raw, inflamed scalp. His eyes were wild, feverish, desperate. "Mara," his voice cracked. "Mara, please." She ran. Her body moved on pure instinct, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. She sprinted for her car, fumbling with her keys, trying to hit the unlock button while running. But Darren was faster. He caught her arm, his grip weak but desperate, and yanked her backward. She stumbled, dropping her keys. They skittered across the concrete, disappearing under a pickup truck. "Stop," Darren pleaded. "Just stop. You have to help me." Mara twisted, trying to break free, but his other hand grabbed her shoulder. His skin was fever-hot, slick with sweat or blood, or something worse. "Let go of me," she screamed. "The curse. You have to lift it." Darren's face was inches from hers, his breath reeking of infection and decay. "Every night I'm you. I feel what you felt. I lived through." He choked on the words.
"Please, Mara. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry."
"Just make it stop." "I didn't curse you." She shoved at his chest, but he held on. "I don't know how."
"You and that thing."
"That demon in the alley." Darren dragged her toward the garage's low wall, away from the stairs, away from escape. "I know you did this. You and him." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Liar." His hand moved to her throat. Not squeezing. Not yet. Just holding her there, his fingers trembling against her windpipe. The same position he'd put her in dozens of times before. The same threat. The same terror. Except this time, Darren was crying. "I can't sleep," he whispered. "I can't eat. I can't think. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back there. In every moment I hurt you. I feel it, Mara. I feel all of it. And I can't. Darren, please." A figure dropped from the structure above them. Valen landed in a crouch between Mara and the low wall, moving so fast he seemed to materialize from nothing. One moment the rooftop was empty except for her and Darren. The next, the vampire stood there, fangs bared, eyes burning with cold fury. "Remove your hand from her throat," Valen said, his voice deadly quiet. Darren's hand spasmed, but didn't let go. You did this to me." "Yes. Take it back. Take the curse back."
"No."
Darren's grip tightened on Mara's throat. Not enough to choke, but enough to make breathing difficult. "Take it back or I'll kill her. I swear to God, I'll." A gunshot cracked through the night. Valen moved sideways, impossibly fast, as a blessed bullet tore through the space where his head had been a microsecond earlier. The round struck the concrete behind him, leaving a smoking hole. Isolde emerged from behind a ventilation unit, crossbow in one hand, pistol in the other. "Valen Corvinus," she called out. "By order of the Vampire Council, you are marked for execution." Everything happened at once. Darren, startled by the gunshot, shoved Mara away and lunged toward the stairs. Valen spun to face Isolde, his body blurring as he moved to intercept her next shot. Mara stumbled backward, her heel catching on a crack in the concrete, and fell hard. Isolde fired again, this shot aimed at center mass, impossible to dodge. Valen raised his hand, and the bullet stopped midair. It hung there, suspended, the blessed silver smoking against his power. With a flick of his wrist, he sent it spinning back toward Isolde. She dove behind the ventilation unit as the bullet embedded itself in the metal with a screech. "Hunter," Valen said, his voice carrying across the rooftop. "You have made a mistake. The only mistake was you drawing attention to our kind." Isolde stepped out, reloading her crossbow with practiced speed. "The reflection curse is forbidden. You know the law." "I have never cared for laws written by cowards." Mara scrambled to her feet, looking for an escape route. Darren was gone, disappeared down the stairwell. The vampire and the hunter faced each other like gunslingers, the air between them crackling with barely contained violence. And she was trapped in the middle of a war she didn't understand. "Run," Valen said without looking at her.
Now.
But before Mara could move, Isolde fired. The hawthorn bolt flew straight and true, aimed at Valen's heart. He caught it with his bare hand, inches from his chest, the blessed wood burning his palm. Smoke rose from his skin. He didn't even flinch.
"Your turn," he said.
Then he moved. Valen closed the distance between himself and Isolde in less than a second. She was fast. Hunter training had honed her reflexes to the peak of human ability. She dropped the crossbow, drew a silver dagger from her belt, and slashed in a practiced arc aimed at his throat.
He was faster.
Valen caught her wrist mid-swing, his grip like iron. Isolde's other hand came up with a vial of holy water, ready to throw it in his face. He twisted her arm with surgical precision, dislocating her shoulder with a wet pop. She screamed but didn't drop the vial. He admired that, briefly, before tearing it from her grasp and crushing it. Glass and holy water rained onto the concrete, hissing where it touched his skin but causing no real damage. "You are skilled," Valen observed, holding her immobilized. "How many vampires have you killed?" 43. Isolde gasped through the pain. "You'll be 44.
No.
He yanked her closer, spinning her around so her back pressed against his chest, his arm across her throat, not choking, just restraining. She struggled, but with her shoulder dislocated, she had no leverage. "I could kill you," Valen said conversationally. "Snap your neck.
Drain you dry.
Leave you for the sunrise. The council would approve. Hunters are fair game when they attack first." "Then do it," Isolde spat. But death is too simple. Too quick. He leaned closer, his breath cold against her ear. "You have hunted my kind for how long?" 12 years. She stiffened. How did he know that? 12 years of training, of memorizing weaknesses, of learning to track and kill. His free hand caught her other wrist, pulling it behind her back. 12 years of purpose, of identity. "Tell me, Hunter, who are you without the hunt?" "What?" Valen's fangs sank into her wrist. But he didn't drink. Instead, he injected something into her bloodstream. Ancient vampire venom mixed with a compulsion so powerful it rewrote neural pathways like fire burning through paper. The magic flowed through her veins, seeking her memories, her training, her instincts, and erasing them. Isolde's scream was different this time. Not pain, though pain was there, but pure existential terror as she felt pieces of herself dissolving. The muscle memory that let her fight in the dark. The knowledge of vampire weaknesses accumulated over years. The iron determination that had driven her since her sister's death. All of it gone. Valen released her and stepped back. Isolde collapsed onto the concrete, gasping, clutching her wrist where 2 small puncture wounds leaked blood. She looked up at Valen with eyes that no longer held warrior's focus. Just confusion. "What?" She tried to stand, stumbled. "Where am I? What happened?" "You are on a parking garage rooftop," Valen said calmly. "You seem to have been in an accident. Your shoulder is dislocated." Isolde touched her shoulder, wincing. I don't remember." She looked at her hands, the calluses from weapons training, the scars from fights, and didn't recognize them. "Why are my hands like this?" Mara watched in horror from behind a parked car, where she'd taken cover when the fight began. The woman who'd been so confident, so dangerous, now looked like a lost child. "What did you do to her?" Mara demanded. Valen turned to face her. "I took her purpose, her training, her memories of being a hunter. She will wake tomorrow thinking she is an ordinary woman who should seek medical attention for her injuries." "That's..." Mara struggled for words. "That's worse than killing her." Yes, he showed no remorse. Death would have been mercy. This is punishment. She chose to hunt my kind. Now she will spend the rest of her life wondering why she has scars she cannot explain and dreams of battles she doesn't remember. Isolde tried to stand again. Managed it this time. I need to go to a hospital. She looked at Valen, at Mara, no recognition in her eyes. Can someone help me? Please. Valen pulled out his phone and dialed 911, his voice shifting to sound concerned, human. Yes, there's an injured woman on the rooftop parking garage at 5th and Morrison. She appears disoriented. Please send an ambulance. He hung up and looked at Isolde. Help is coming. Sit down before you fall. She did, obedient, confused, broken. Mara felt sick. And now, Valen said, his voice hardening, for the one who started all of this. He moved to the stairwell entrance, listening. Mara could hear it too now, labored breathing, footsteps, someone climbing the stairs from below.
Darren.
He'd circled back, perhaps hearing the commotion, perhaps unable to resist one final confrontation. He emerged onto the rooftop, clutching a piece of broken rebar he'd found in the stairwell, his face a mask of desperation and madness. No more running, Darren gasped. I end this tonight. I end you. I end the curse. Valen walked toward him slowly, deliberately. You want the curse ended? Valen asked. Very well. I will modify it. He raised his hand, fingers moving in those same geometric patterns Mara had seen in the alley. Silver light bloomed in the darkness, brighter than before, illuminating every corner of the rooftop. The curse was designed to make you feel what she felt, Valen continued. But I realize now that was insufficient. You are too focused on your own suffering to truly understand. The silver light shot forward like arrows, embedding themselves deeper into Darren's spine. He screamed and collapsed, convulsing. Now, Valen said quietly, you will experience something more comprehensive. Every person you have ever hurt, and I sense there have been many, will visit you in your dreams. You will live through every moment of fear you created, every ounce of pain you inflicted, every night, forever. Darren's screams faded to whimpers as the curse settled into his bones. You will not die, Valen continued. You will not go mad enough to escape into catatonia. You will remain conscious, aware, suffering, for the rest of your natural life. He turned and walked away, leaving Darren twitching on the concrete. Below, sirens approached. Mara stood frozen, witnessing justice that was also cruelty, watching punishment that satisfied something dark inside her even as it horrified her. Valen paused beside her. You should leave before the police arrive. She couldn't move. Mara, his voice was gentle now. Go. This time, her legs obeyed. 1 week later, Mara stood at the edge of the abandoned industrial district where the city had forgotten to care. Homeless shelters, long shuttered and condemned, lined the street like hollow teeth. Broken windows stared out at nothing. Graffiti covered every surface. The city had plans to redevelop this area, had been making those plans for 15 years while the buildings slowly crumbled. Valen waited for her in front of what had once been a community center. He didn't pretend anymore. Didn't carry a tourist map or wear a camera. He simply stood there, still as a statue, watching her approach with those two dark eyes. Mara stopped 10 feet away, the same distance they'd maintained in the alley behind the cafe. You asked me to come, she said. Here I am. Thank you, he inclined his head slightly. I was uncertain you would. I almost didn't, she wrapped her arms around herself despite the warm evening. The news says Darren's been committed to a psychiatric facility upstate. They say he's catatonic except for the nightmares. Screams every night like he's being tortured. Yes, and that woman is sold. She checked herself into a hospital claiming she'd been in an accident, but she has no ID, no memory of who she is. They're calling her Jane Doe. She will build a new life. Valen's voice held no sympathy. A quieter one. Mara took a breath. Detective Webb came by the cafe yesterday. Asked me again if I knew anything about what happened. I lied to a police officer. For you. You lied for yourself, Valen corrected. What would you tell him? That a vampire cursed your abuser? That would help no one inch. He was right. She hated that he was right. Why did you ask me to come here? Mara asked. Valen was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before, something almost vulnerable beneath the ancient power. I have lived for 300 years, he said. I have watched empires rise and fall. I have seen humanity at its best and worst. I have studied your kind with the dedication of a scholar examining a fascinating species. That's what we are to you. A species to study. You are a paradox. He stepped closer, just one step, respecting her space. Humans hurt each other with creativity I cannot comprehend. You inflict suffering on those you claim to love. You create systems meant to protect the weak, then allow those systems to fail. You are capable of such cruelty. But, Mara prompted, but you are also capable of mercy I have never seen in my kind. Forgiveness that defies logic. Love that persists despite betrayal. You rebuild yourselves after being broken. You protect strangers. You sacrifice for people you will never meet, his head tilted. I do not understand you. After 3 centuries, I still do not understand. Mara laughed, a short, bitter sound. Join the club. I don't understand us either. That is what I want from you. She blinked. What? Teach me, Valen said. Help me understand how humans hurt each other. Why they hurt each other. What drives a man to drag a woman into an alley. What breaks inside someone that they become like Darren Grayson. You want me to explain abuse to you? You've lived for 300 years. And I have observed from the outside. Always watching, never understanding the internal logic. He paused. You lived through it. You survived it. You can explain what I cannot see. Mara stared at him.
Why?
Why does it matter to you? Because I am tired of watching. For the first time, something like emotion crossed his face. Frustration, perhaps, or weariness. I am tired of seeing the same patterns repeat across centuries. The same violence. The same failures of human justice. The same victims left to suffer while their abusers walk free. So you want to punish them all? Curse every abuser in the world. I want to understand them first. Valen met her eyes. And then, yes, I want to punish them. But intelligently. Efficiently. I want to become what your system cannot be. Justice that actually arrives. Mara's mind raced. What he was proposing was insane. Vigilante justice dispensed by a vampire who'd lived longer than America had existed. It violated every principle of law, of due process, of civilization. And yet, Darren would never hurt anyone again. The curse ensured that. And how many other Darrens were out there hurting other Maras, protected by systems that moved too slowly or cared too little? I won't help you hurt innocent people, Mara said firmly. I have no interest in innocent people. And I get to define who's innocent, not you. Valen considered this. Acceptable. If I think you've gone too far, I walk away. No questions, no revenge. Agreed. And I don't. She struggled with the words. I don't move in with you or swear loyalty or whatever vampire servants do in movies. I'm not your property. I do not want property. Valen's voice was sincere. I want a teacher. A consultant. Someone who can explain what I cannot see. Mara looked at the abandoned buildings around them, then back at Valen. A vampire king asking a cafe worker to help him understand humanity. It was absurd.
Impossible.
But she'd watched him curse her abuser with magic that shouldn't exist. She'd seen him erase a hunter's entire identity with a bite. She'd witnessed the supernatural become real. Maybe absurd was the new normal. One condition, she said. Yes. You buy me dinner first. Real dinner, not. She gestured vaguely at him. Whatever vampires eat. For the first time since she'd met him, Valen smiled. A real smile, not the cold expression she'd seen before. It made him look younger, almost human. I accept your terms. They walked together away from the abandoned district, toward the parts of the city where lights still shone and life still happened. A vampire king and a survivor, forming an alliance that made no sense and perfect sense simultaneously. Behind them, the empty buildings stood silent, bearing witness to a partnership that would change how justice was delivered in the dark corners where law feared to tread. Mara didn't know if what she was doing was right. But for the first time in years, she felt something other than fear. She felt purpose. And in the shadows of the city, other predators would soon learn what 300 years of patience combined with human understanding could create. Not a savior, not a hero, but justice with fangs, delivered to those who thought themselves untouchable. The Vampire King had found his teacher, and the real work was about to begin.
The end.